The low, hypnotic pulse of deep house music was the lifeblood of Nirvana, a club so exclusive its address was a secret whispered among the city's elite. From her throne-like booth on the mezzanine, Zhang Qiluo surveyed her kingdom. Her gaze, sharp and analytical, swept over the dance floor, missing nothing. She wore a tailored white suit, a stark beacon of power amidst the shadows and shimmering lights. Tonight, like every night, she was in absolute control until the crash. A young waiter, his face a mask of boyish panic, stumbled near her table. A tray of crystal flutes tipped, and a river of crimson wine cascaded down the pristine white lapel of her jacket. The music seemed to stutter. Her collective, indrawn breath hushed the immediate area. The boy stood frozen, his skin turning a ghostly white under the violet lights. Before Zhang could utter a single, dismissive word, a shadow detached itself from a nearby table. "You clumsy little rat." The voice was a gravelly sneer. Viper Dragon, a lone shark with hands as dirty as his reputation, loomed over the waiter. His two hulking bodyguards moved in, caging the boy between them. "Do you have any idea who you just insulted? That suit costs more than your miserable life." One of the thugs grabbed the boy's collar, yanking him forward, apologized to Ms. Qiluo. "On your knees." The boy, whose name tag read Shui Yang, trembled violently, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed almost performative in its purity. He looked less like a waiter and more like a sacrificial lamb. "That's enough." Zhang's voice was quiet, yet it sliced through the tension with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, but every eye was now on her. She slowly dabbed at the stain with a silk napkin, her movements unhurried and deliberate. "Viper," she said, finally lifting her eyes to meet his. They were cold, devoid of emotion. "This is my club. That boy is my employee. You will unhand him." Viper Dragon smirked, a flash of gold glinting in his mouth. "Zhang, it's a matter of respect. The boy embarrassed you, and you are embarrassing yourself," she countered, rising to her feet. The simple act of her standing was an escalation, a shift in power that was palpable. "The only disrespect I see here is you threatening my staff on my property. Leave now, or the next drink you have will be for a straw for a very long time." The threat was delivered with the dispassionate air of a weather forecast. Viper Dragon's smirk faltered. He knew her reputation was not built on bluffs. He shot Shui Yang a look of pure venom before gesturing curtly to his men. They released the boy, who stumbled back, catching himself on the edge of Zhang's table. As the entourage retreated into the crowd, Shui Yang finally looked up at Zhang. His eyes, large and dark, were glistening with unused tears. Gratitude and awe radiated from him, a raw, unfiltered wave of emotion that momentarily caught her off guard. It was the look of someone who had just been pulled from a ledge. The silence in Zhang Qiluo's apartment was a physical presence, as stark and minimalist as the decor. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and the panoramic view of the city's glittering spine was her only companion. She was reviewing quarterly projections, the glow of 3 monitors painting her face in cold, shifting light, when a quiet sound pulled her from her focus. Shui Yang stood in the doorway of her study, holding a single porcelain cup of steaming chamomile tea. He looked young, almost breakable against the severe lines of her home. "Shangya," he began, his voice a soft intrusion. I wanted to." The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the hushed interior of Zhang's Maybach as it sliced through the city's glittering veins. In the back seat, she dabbed a wipe against the cut on Shui Yang's cheek, her movements precise, almost clinical. He flinched, a theatrical wince that seemed to practice. Her eyes, however, were not on his pained expression but on the wound itself. It was a clean, shallow line, dramatic, but not dangerous, like his bruised knuckles, which were red and swollen enough to look heroic, but lacked the deep, messy trauma of a genuine brawl. Her analytical mind, the one that dissected corporate balance sheets, was now dissecting him. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he murmured, his voice a low, earnest thrum. He captured her hand, pressing the antiseptic wipe against his own skin. "But I'd do it again, Zhang. I'd do anything for you." His gaze was intense, a carefully crafted performance of absolute devotion. "If it proved how I feel, I'd give you my life." Zhang pulled her hand back, the warmth of his skin feeling like a brand. "Your life?" she asked, her tone deceptively mild, "or just a conveniently timed appearance and some superficial wounds?" The mask of the wounded lover slipped for a fraction of a second. Surprise, then a flicker of something cold and calculating darted through his eyes before being buried by a wave of manufactured hurt. "How can you say that, after what he did? After what I did to protect you?" "It was too perfect, Shui Yang." She leaned back against the plush leather, her eyes never leaving his face. She saw the subtle tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly at his side. "You." Showing up the exact moment Zhao Shen cornered me. "You." Taking a few cosmetic hits, it's a good story, but it feels written. She let the silence stretch, the hum of the tires on the asphalt filling the void. Then she delivered the final blow. "It's the kind of meticulous, high-risk, high-reward strategy Chong Yusen is famous for. So, tell me, are you him?" He recalled as if struck. "Chong Yusen?" He let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "You think I'm your rival, the man trying to destroy everything you've built?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a wounded whisper. "Is it so impossible for you to believe that someone, a nobody like me, could genuinely care for you? That someone might see the person behind the CEO and want to protect her?" He turned it back on her, a masterful deflection that painted her suspicion as a symptom of a cold and trusting heart. But for the first time, his words didn't land. They simply glanced off the armor of her doubt. The next morning, Zhang felt the unease from the night before clinging to her like a shroud. The confrontation had solved nothing. It had only deepened the mystery. She was nursing a cup of black coffee in her minimalist living room when the chime of her doorbell broke the silence. A moment later, her mother's cheerful voice echoed from the foyer, followed by the familiar, boisterous laugh of her younger brother, Liu Wei. "Sis, don't hide away in here." Wei bounded into the room, a grin plastered on his face. He was her mother's son from a second marriage, a boy she'd always tried to mentor. "Mum told me you've taken on a new charity case. A student named Shui Yang." His tone was teasing, but his eyes held a glint of something more. "I hear his tutoring sessions are running pretty late." Zhang's spine stiffened. "It's not what you think, Wei." "Oh, let them be," her mother said, beaming as she entered. "It's wonderful. Zhang, you work too hard. A nice young man is just what you need. You must bring him for dinner this weekend." Wei flopped onto the sofa. "He must be a genius to keep up with you. Almost as smart as that new math tutor you set me up with, Professor Zhu. The man's incredible. I finally understand calculus." Zhang froze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Professor Zhu, I never arranged the tutor for you." "You didn't?" Wei feigned surprise. "Huh? He said you sent him." Must have been a mix-up. But it wasn't. It was a message, another piece of the web, woven through her own family. Professor Zhu, Shui Yang. The names felt connected, part of a suffocatingly intricate design. She felt cornered in her own home, the cheerful conversation a thinly veiled ambush. Her denials would only make her sound defensive, her suspicions like paranoia. The pressure was immense, a deliberate campaign to destabilize her on every front, personal and professional. Later that day, seeking refuge in the one place she felt completely in control, she strode into her office. The space was a reflection of her mind. Organized, pristine, and secure, or so she thought. She stopped dead in the doorway. There, with his back to her, was the new cleaner. He wasn't mopping or dusting. One of his hands was deep inside the bottom drawer of her private desk, the one containing her personal notebooks and preliminary strategy drafts. She didn't make a sound, watching as his fingers methodically searched the contents. Finally, her voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold as glass. Looking for something? He jumped, spinning around with a practiced look of innocent alarm. It was him. The set of his shoulders, the shape of his hands, it was Shui Yang. The cheap, ill-fitting cleaner's uniform was just another costume. Miss Killuo, Manager Peng said this drawer was sticking. He asked me to wipe the runners. It was a pathetic lie. Her eyes narrowed, catching the unnatural bulge at his waist, tucked beneath the fabric of his uniform. Before he could react, she closed the distance between them into long strides, her hand shooting out and closing around the hard object. She pulled it free. A small, wicked-looking utility knife with a retractable blade. Does Manager Peng also ask you to carry weapons to clean a desk? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Panic flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a desperate, theatrical gambit. It's for protection, he blurted out. Sometimes clients get demanding, aggressive. To demonstrate, he flicked the blade out and drew a swift, shallow line across his own forearm. Blood welled instantly. See? A little cut. They get scared. They back off. It's better than them doing worse. It was a grotesque performance of self-victimization, a final, desperate attempt to reinforce the persona of a helpless boy tossed about by a cruel world. As he stood there, holding his bleeding arm up as evidence of his vulnerability, one of her senior marketing directors walked past the open door. Dang, taking it easy with a single floor assignment. I remember hearing you used to juggle all 3 VIP suites at the Grand Hotel by yourself. Said you were a legend at handling difficult clients. The casual remark landed like a thunderclap. A legend, capable, efficient. The entire fragile facade of the clumsy, indebted student and the meek, terrified cleaner disintegrated into dust. He wasn't a victim. He was a professional. Shun looked from the bloody cut on his arm to his panicked eyes, and all the lingering traces of sympathy she ever felt for him turned to ice. The game was over. She pointed toward the door, her voice devoid of all emotion. Get out. Shang, wait. I can explain. Now, the word was not a request. It was an execution. The chill of the penthouse boardroom was a manufactured cold, a deliberate atmosphere designed to intimidate. It did not touch Shang Killuo. She walked across the expanse of black marble, the sharp clicks of her heels the only sound, each step a declaration of war. Her gaze swept over the silent, grim-faced executives of the Chong Corporation, dismissing them as mere furniture. Her eyes, cold as slate, settled on the floor-to-ceiling window, where a man stood with his back to the room, silhouetted against the glittering sprawl of the city. He turned, and the illusion was almost perfect. It was Shuang's face, the soft line of his jaw, the gentle eyes that had once looked at her with such convincing vulnerability. But the posture was all Chong Yusen, the bespoke suit draped over his frame with an air of arrogant ownership, and a lazy, self-satisfied smirk played on his lips. This was not the boy who flinched at the sound of thunder. This was the predator who created the storm. Ms. Killuo, Chong Yusen said, his voice as smooth, a mocking purr that was a twisted echo of Shuang's quiet tones. To what do I owe the pleasure? You seem to have lost your way. Killuo Enterprises is across the river. He strolled toward the head of the immense obsidian table, gesturing to a chair as if she were a petitioner. Whatever this is, I'm sure we can discuss it. We live in a civilized society after all. We don't solve our little disagreements with temper tantrums. His condescension was a lit match. But Xiang's fury was a chamber filled with gasoline, waiting for a single, precise spark. She ignored the chair, her body a rigid line of defiance. "I'm not here to talk." She cut him off before he could utter another placating lie. With a sharp, deliberate movement, she placed her phone face up on the polished table. The screen glowed to life, displaying a large, ominous timer in stark red numerals, already counting down from 60 seconds. "That's how long you have to digitally authorize the complete transfer of all Southern mining rights back to Killua Enterprises," she stated, her voice devoid of heat, as chilling as the room itself. The executives shifted, murmuring in disbelief. Chung Yusen's smirk faltered for the first time, a flicker of confusion clouding his eyes. He scoffed, recovering his composure. "You're bluffing. You have no leverage." 50 seconds, Zhang said, her eyes locked on his. She saw him for what he was, a bow playing a king, using a handsome face as both shield and sword. The memory of his warmth, his feigned shyness, crawled like a snake in her gut. Every shared meal, every quiet moment, every time he looked at her as if she were his entire world, it was all ash. 40 seconds. He took a step closer, leaning his hands on the table, trying to loom over her. He lowered his voice, attempting to invoke the intimacy he had so carefully fabricated. "Shang, this is foolish. Let's not do this in front of them." 30 seconds. The red numbers reflected in his dark eyes. The air grew thick, heavy with the insect. He was waiting for her to break, for the emotional woman he thought he'd been manipulating to finally show herself. He was still playing the game, still believing he held the winning hand. "What could you possibly have that would force my hand?" he sneered, his confidence a brittle shell. The timer ticked past 10, 9, 8. Shum watched him, a ghost of a smile touching her lips, but it was a smile of utter devastation. It held no joy, only the bitter taste of truth. 5-3 he stared back, defiant, a king in his castle, daring her to make a move. She let the silence hang for a fraction of a second, letting him feel the precipice. Then she delivered the final blow, her voice soft but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "You're right. Shui Yang has nothing," she whispered, the name a venomous dart. "But I imagine the board of Chong Corporation would be very interested to see proof of embezzlement on a scale that would not only cost you this company, but would also guarantee a reunion with the father you claim is dead." His blood ran cold. The smug mask didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The swagger, the power, to control it all evaporated, leaving behind the stark, naked shock of a boy who'd been found out. He was silent, utterly still, as the timer on the phone hit 0, its soft chime echoing like a funeral bell in the tomb-like room. Zhang didn't wait for his response. She grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled him toward the door. "We're not done." The executives were frozen in a state of collective paralysis as she dragged their CEO from his own throne room, his stunned silence his only answer. The drive was a blur of neon and fury. Zhang's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The engines were a poor substitute for the scream trapped in her throat. She finally slammed on the brakes, the tire screeching as the car lurched to a halt under the lonely, flickering light of a forgotten overpass. The sudden silence was deafening. Without a word, she got out, wrenching his door open and pulling him out onto the damp asphalt. The cold night air hit him, but it was the look on her face that stole his breath. The mask of the Ice Queen CEO was gone. In its place was a landscape of raw, profound hurt, her eyes glittering with unused tears of rage. Was any of it real? She demanded, her voice shaking with the effort of holding herself together. A ruthless tycoon, heir to the Chong Empire, pretending to be a helpless college student drowning in debt. She laughed, a broken, ugly sound. It was perfect. The damsel in distress. "Except you were the one wearing the dress," She began to pace, each word a meticulous step, dissecting his entire performance. The way you'd look down when you spoke, pretending to be shy. The story about needing money for your mother's surgery. The way you'd flinch when I raised my voice. All of it was a lie designed to get you close, to make me trust you, to make me pity you while you dismantled my company from the inside. He stared at her, the last vestiges of his composure gone. He was just Shui Yang now, cornered and desperate. Shang, listen to me, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I don't know who Chong Yusen is. People say I look like him. It's just a coincidence. I swear. He reached for her arm, a desperate attempt to rekindle the connection he had so masterfully faked. She flinched back as if his touch were acid. Don't, she hissed, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Don't you dare. The sight of his crumbling facade gave her no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. He had taken her compassion, her trust, her affection, and twisted them into weapons to be used against her. You know, she said, her voice suddenly flat. All emotion burned out of it. I used to think I owed you. The day we met, you pushed me out of the way of that bike. You saved me. That was the hook, wasn't it? The first clever move in your long game. He opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. Don't worry, the debt is paid. You saved me from a scraped knee. In return, I saved you from a lifetime in prison and let you keep your name. I'd say we're more than even. She looked at him one last time, at the face she had once wanted to protect. Now the face of her deepest betrayal. There was nothing left inside her for him, no love, no hate, just a vast, barren emptiness. Our business is concluded. She turned and walked back to her car, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. She slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors, a final, definitive barrier between them. He stood frozen on the asphalt, a ghost under the sickly yellow light. The brilliant strategist and the vulnerable boy both lost in the ruin he had created. Zhang didn't look back. She started the engine, turned the car around, and drove away, leaving Chong Yusen stranded in the darkness, utterly and irrevocably alone.